Stopping advanced threats requires knowing exactly what you're up against. ExtraHop Reveal X is the only solution that shows you not just where intruders are going, but where they've been. 90-day look-back and complete network visibility across the data center, cloud, and device edge help security teams respond 84% faster with ExtraHop Reveal X network detection and response. Explore the interactive demo at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. Cyber risk and compliance automation is finally here. Legacy GRC systems cannot support the powerful, real-time automation and oversight that organizations require to take risks that matter to succeed. CyberSync continuous control automation ingests data from the IT GRC stack to update controls against regulatory requirements and risks in real time, delivering insights and visibility. See how members of the Fortune 500 are saving millions annually by visiting securityweekly.com/CyberSync.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Jason Albuquerque and Adrian Sanabria. Do you want to stay in the loop on all things Security Weekly? Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe on your favorite podcast catcher, our YouTube channel, sign up for our mailing list, join our Discord server, or follow us on our newest live streaming platform, Twitch. In our July 14th democast at 11 a.m. Eastern, learn how to reveal and protect your entire attack surface. Then join us July 15th at 11 a.m. to learn how a thoughtful approach to SASE can improve security and enable scalability. And finally, in our July 22nd technical segment at 11 a.m. Eastern, learn how guided SaaS NDR enables rapid response. Visit securityweekly.com/webcast to register now. If you've missed any of our previously recorded webcasts or technical trainings, they are available for your viewing pleasure at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Articles for the week, gentlemen. I did pull in some articles related to the last segment because I thought it was interesting as we start thinking about, the topics and the alignment of the news and how this all aligns. We start with, a kind of an interesting one on board perspectives and what people need to do to be prepared for the board. And Jim brought this up around metrics, and this article digs a little bit into some of the challenges and aspects around metrics reporting.
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, I want to use the board term loosely because we were just talking about public sector, right? And if you're talking about city councils and school committees and, legislature at a state house, this conversation's happening at that level as well, right? Now we consider them public sector level boards, right? Who kind of manage the operations of the government entities. So this is happening no matter where you go, private sector, public sector, nonprofit organization boards are even having these conversations.
Yeah, it probably changes the conversation somewhat, right?
It does.
What kind of board you're talking to?
It 100% does, right? I mean, the context of what the business is it matters, right? So, a fintech organization versus a municipality, it's going to be a very different conversation.
Yeah, I think the challenge, when we think about the board, we think about public companies and the fiduciary responsibility of shareholders. In the public sector, that's not necessarily the case, right? It's more about the citizen, protecting the citizen. It's a slightly different discussion. And so the types of discussions and conversations, the way you have to present security would be different because it may not be a reputation or a finance component. It might be a safety component to a citizen, for example.
100%. I mean, think about it this way. Think about the data that our governments collect on us as citizens. So number one, it's our information that's there, right? And secondly, let's think about the components of what makes public sector organizations. You're talking police, fire, EMS, right? Public safety entities. I mean, critical infrastructure, right? How many public sector utilities are there out there in the country? A ton. So, you take a look at it, and number one, services provided, and secondly, what the data that they're actually collecting from us.
Yeah. And I think, look, we know the trends, right? We've seen and just the rise in ransomware. It's just been crazy. I mean, every state, local, federal, critical infrastructure area, they're all seeing huge upticks. I saw a report somewhere. It was like something like 7,000% or something. And the number of ransomware attacks that are, not that they're all successful, but just the uptick in those attack vectors, it was something like 7,000%. And these are organizations that don't have large security teams, large security budgets, and they have to be prepared to defend those networks and those environments.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100%. And at the end of the day, and when we talk about the public sector, it's hard for me to say this because they don't have the support that they need. Like I mentioned, most municipalities don't have a CISO unless you're a big city, right? So who's going to actually get this data to present to a city council, right? Or a school board or at the state level? It's number one, you have to have somebody who can lead the way from a security perspective and be able to report out on these things. And, my hopes, and I've seen this in many instances, is that the IT director or the CIO is playing kind of both roles. They're playing the CIO and the security officer role.
Yeah.
And one of them, they're probably going to be playing in a more reactive than proactive role.
Yeah.
Right?
Of course, just nature of the beast, right? They don't have the funding for enough personnel to be able to, focus on the growth and the strategy, right? They're focused on to keep the lights on, unfortunately. But that's why we see so much risk in the public sector these days and so much happening at that level.
Yeah, agreed. That ties a little bit into the second article. Cybersecurity today requires greater digital and business understanding. This is an interview with Mark Brown from BSI. And there's just a great section in here. It says, what are the biggest challenges facing your sector and how are you tackling them? He says skills shortage, but not in the technical sense, but in the ability to translate traditional cybersecurity from a technical perspective centered around compliance to a discussion focused on business enablement.
Yeah, and I would agree, right? I mean, there's technical talent out there, but a lot of the challenge that we're having is we need it at a certain level, and that level is really the interface to the business, right? I mean, it's not easy to get technical talent, right? For me, I've seen it take 8 months, 10 months to get some technical talent in, even longer for more leadership, or I would say business engaged type talent, right? Where you can be that technical translator from the business to the IT or security team and vice versa, right? To be able to have that conversation back and forth between the business and the technical side. It's really hard to get talent there.
Yeah, I have a lot of conversations about internal pen testing teams where they need to start and things like that. And, from my experience as a penetration tester and, even on the auditing side, being a PCI QSA, I always found it shocking how little the security folks and even some of the IT folks understood, their own applications and processes. Like everybody knew the little bit that they needed to do their job. But I found it was extremely rare that anybody could describe to me, how a process started from, beginning to end, or had the documentation for that, or if the documentation existed, it was an 8-year-old Visio, that hadn't been updated. Yeah. And it's so important to be able to, look at the last article, evaluate the effectiveness of your security controls. If you don't even understand how these business processes function and work, you can't hope to get there.
Right. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. Right. And there was a telling remark in the article of, cybersecurity leaders and professionals transitioning to the mindset of a digital risk management professional. Right. And I think we've had this conversation before, right, Matt? It's, start becoming a risk management professional or end up reporting to one. Remember those conversations?
Yeah. Yes.
That was a telling sign right there, right in this interview.
Yeah, and yes, risk management's where it's at. Because it's about managing business risk and correlating that into different security risks. But at the end of the day, back to the private sector, a publicly held company, it's a fiduciary responsibility, and so there are business risks are going to drive a lot of that. Absolutely. Now we get into risk management from the ransomware perspective. So I've been doing a lot of research on NIST lately as we're getting ready to launch a critical infrastructure resilience survey in partnership with InfraGard, because we've seen this rise in ransomware attacks. And the question is, how are organizations prepared for ransomware? How resilient are these different critical infrastructure areas? So NIST comes out and says, look, we've created a preliminary draft for ransomware risk management, back to our risk conversation.
Yep.
So I opened the white paper. I dug into it a little bit. It was interesting. When I created the resiliency survey that the InfraGard is reviewing right now, and we'll release aspects of that out to this audience when we fully get it fielded into the field for responses. I use the NIST CSF, right, and the cybersecurity framework, and kind of structured it around those areas. And there's some really good white papers out there. But when you get into this draft, it goes a slightly different approach. It gets a little more into certain technologies to implement. I took it more from a process perspective. I didn't get into much of the technology. This white paper gets a little more specific on capabilities, which I thought was interesting because it's not how I would have initially approached it.
Yeah, no, agreed. And when I read it, I almost felt like this was built to be an addendum to maybe the CSF, right? Because some of the questions that they ask is, have you already adopted the cybersecurity framework? Are you familiar with it, right? So it's almost like I felt like this was kind of an addendum to it and said, here are some best practices to help maybe mitigate the risk of ransomware. I didn't read it as a comprehensive framework for mitigating,
Right, because if I'm going to go out and do a risk assessment, right, I'm going to look for kind of broader level gaps in maybe my process and control environment. This is a little too prescriptive for me to say, is that all we're going to focus on? Because to me, that's not enough either.
No, I would agree. And you know what, though? It's my philosophy all the time. If an organization doesn't have anything, use this as a framework to get started, maybe, right? I mean, something's better than nothing to get you off and running. But again, it reads like an addendum and not really a comprehensive white paper on it.
Yeah, exactly. And it was almost like more policy focused, like do this, don't do that. Anyways, it was just, I was like so excited when I saw it because I've been doing all this work across 1825, 1826, and 1800-11 that I thought this was going to be kind of a comprehensive piece that sits over top of it and lays out a risk management framework to get into those three docs. But then that's not what it did. It fell a little short for me.
Well, you want to know what, Matt? It's a preliminary doc and they're looking for feedback. So maybe feedback like this is going to go back to them and they'll build it out a little bit better.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of this stuff already out there. It does seem kind of like a repeat of stuff that we've already seen out there, where it's like, here's what ransomware looks like. Here's the kind of stuff that goes on. And it's really not ransomware. Like ransomware is like step 17 in these processes, right? It's more of a extortion campaign that uses ransomware, for that, one of those final steps. And the piece that I'd like to see more of is, I've been on this whole campaign of thinking of InfoSec more like a sport, where you got to practice at it to get good at it. And same goes for ransomware. There's some great open source software out there like Infection Monkey that will mimic what ransomware does. And you can actually use that as like a live training exercise, but I really don't think we can get good at the detection and response components of any of this stuff without some active live practice on our tools with our people.
Oh yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I take the military side of it, and it's train the way you fight. You have to be training, right? You have to.
Yeah, and how do you know if you've got all your systems identified, you've got the right protection capabilities in, if you can't do simulations on a detection response side, right? Because where are your blind spots, right? And you need those kind of tools and those practice areas to continue to refine your identify and protect domains, which should precede your detection response domains, right? And I think a lot of people focus on detection response before they've really nailed down and really, kind of got their identity and protect down. And
Right.
so it's like putting the cart before the horse in some cases.
Yeah, no, 100%. But honestly, that whole train the way you fight leads right into the business continuity article,
I was
right?
about to say the same thing. I was just about to say that.
I literally highlighted a couple of those items that it's that, right? Number 7 is auditing across a range of BCDR areas. Test, examine, quality assurance, right? That's all part of it. That's a must.
Yeah, I've always maintained that if you've never actually gone through and thrown the switch on your BCPDR plan, you probably know about 50% of what you need. You probably you're about halfway there. Yeah.
Yes. So the whole recovery domain, which I didn't talk about in the last segment, is exactly what this is focused on. It's like, how do you prepare to recover from an event? And ransomware is the most visible right now in the industry, but these are some of the things not only from what your BCDR people have to, kind of the skills they need, but also practice, how you improving. Are you looking at lessons learned and updating your processes? I mean, these are all important aspects to that whole recovery domain.
And it shows, right, with a big shining light, the importance of having a diverse team as part of your BCDR team, right? Because you have communication skill sets that you need. You have business impact, right, and analysis skills you need, project management skills. You need a financial person on the team, right? So it shows the level of diversity that you need on a recovery team.
Yeah, exactly right. It's a good article for people who are in the space or want to get into the space. It's a really good article. Let's see. Next one is, how to prepare for a transition. So how to succeed in a CIO transition. We talked about transition planning last week in one of the articles, and this was an interview with a CIO, and there was this great statement in there, and now I got to find it. Basically how he said, oh gosh, I got to find it. It was basically, my job was to groom him so I could retire.
Oh yeah, he spent 10 years grooming his successor, right? Ultimately in the mindset of saying, listen, I'm going to mentor someone from within, and I'm going to help them build leadership skills. I'm going to get them to know the business and the organization. I'm going to use them as a proxy when I can't be around for conversations with leaders, board members, whatever the case may be. And I'm going to spend my time grooming the next person who's going to take my spot, right? And in the interview, it basically says, here are all the things that came out of it that were an extreme benefit, right? It's number one, the person was confident because they were involved, they knew the business, they had the relationships. They didn't have to build a new reputation within the organization, right? They had that built over time, that respect and that trust, and being seen as a subject matter expert in the area. That was built over time with their colleagues, right? And then they didn't have to learn the business, right? And so the whole ramp up time, and we talked about this last week, the whole ramp up time was completely avoided, right? The whole confidence crisis of a new leader was completely avoided. And they created a succession plan that was literally, this is my last day. The next person steps in, and they didn't miss a beat.
Right. This is why I'm a big believer in documentation. Not because I'm trying to put somebody out of a job. I'm trying to put myself out of a job. Because think about this, right? You got the process in place. Now you can start to hand those processes down to your successor. They can start running the day-to-day. What I liked about the way he structured this was his role was communication, business relationships, helping with the strategy, but the rest of the team ran the day-to-day, right?
Right.
Because they understood the ins and outs of the business, how the process ran, et cetera, and then could easily step up to fill that communication, strategy, relationship gap because they had already built the relationships. They could take that next step. So this is why documentation and process is so important to me, because I am going to retire one of these days. And you can't get there if you don't put these foundational elements in place to get your team to take over the day-to-day, so you can just eventually just kind of exit the picture, stage right.
into the sunset. I like to say into the sunset, right? I mean, you know my philosophy. With my teams, it's, I want to teach you and guide you and mentor you So that way someday you can take my job. I want you to take my job, because when you do, I'm on to my next best thing, right? That's the beauty of being a leader. And I love the leadership skills that came out in this article. I mean, honestly, even for departments, because he had mentioned the CISO, right? That wasn't directly involved and didn't already report to this VP, because he created an environment where those two collaborated so much. It was like the flip of a switch to be able to take on the security team and just keep managing like nothing ever happened. No bumps in the road.
Yeah.
And also consider how much less expensive, I don't want to say cheaper, but bringing somebody who's been groomed from the inside, like how much does it cost, to locate and hire a new CIO in an organization?
Yes.
I mean, you're talking.
How much does it cost, and how long
a 6 to 12 month?
How long does it take? How long does it take?
Like a 6 to 12 month process, and you're flying people out, and I mean that's a huge effort.
Mm-hmm.
You're paying,
and then the whole ramp up time, right? Now, all right, now it's day one for me as a CIO. I got to learn the business now, right? So
right.
that costs money
all
too.
All that to get somebody who's just starting from nothing.
Right.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's a huge time saver. And by the way, Cyber Risk Alliance, it will not take me 10 years to do this. It will be sooner.
Seed planted.
Oh man, close to home.
I'm not working another 10 years. I'm telling you right now. I got a golf course in Texas with my name on it.
Now is the time. Now is the time to start planning.
Exactly. SOC burnout is real. 3 ways to prevent that burnout. We've talked about this too, right? I mean, it's expensive to replace SOC analysts. Find them. You got a skills gap. Burnout's going to happen. So why not get ahead of it if you're a CISO? And some good guidelines here, Jason, on some preventative steps.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, they literally, did some analytics as to the why. So it's important to understand the why, right? Why are the folks burning out? It's increased workload. It's the 24/7, 365 on call. It's lack of network visibility and IT visibility. We just talked about that in the previous segment, right? Yep. We talked about burnout because of that. And then
the job sucks.
Alert fatigue, right? I mean, we just talked about that in the last segment.
Awful job. So there are just certain jobs that just require you to just dive into so much data every day. And for me, it was being a PCI QSA was torture. Yep. Like you might have to pull together 1,000 different pieces of evidence. And, back in those days, we were doing it all with a spreadsheet, and some of it's interviews, some of it's screenshots, some of it's, documentation, Word docs and stuff like that. And it's just the nature of this type of job. You've got to, it's got to be structured so that it doesn't just wear people out.
Right. And can we be doing things as leaders to change that, right? We were just talking about the ecosystem approach. Can that help with the lack of network and IT visibility across the entire environment and give them better context, right? Leading to better alerts to go around, chasing the important stuff instead of the noise.
Yeah, I think the first two really highlight the previous segment we did with Jim, in that with an integrated ecosystem approach and bringing all that data together, I can remove distractions so I can focus on the alerts that I need to. But the foundation of that is having that integrated tool set and process set in order to do it. And so those two go so hand in hand with our previous discussion.
Yep, 100%. And it's up to us as leaders to be doing things to make that job easier, right? Because we don't want our folks burning out. And hey, our SOC analysts, we need them. At the end of it, we need them. So we need to be following these type of recommendations.
Yeah, definitely. The last article, there's a 7th article this week. I usually only do 6, but I had to put this in because we've talked about this a couple times. Colorado looks like it's going to be state number 3 to put in a privacy act. And here we are. We're almost 3 states in. I mean, I think Governor Polis is probably going to sign this thing. I don't think he's going to delay it very, very long at all. So here's state number 3. And where are we at the federal level? Because what we're going to end up with is 50 different privacy acts.
Oh my God, brutal. I mean, kudos to Colorado for stepping up and doing something. And in the vacuum of not having something from the federal perspective, but it's just going to make things more complicated for businesses like us, right? I mean, now we're going to have to manage yet another, Privacy Act, and it's just, we need something at the federal level. And my understanding, reading the article, I mean, there's some guardrails here, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it applies to organizations that store or process personal data of more than 100,000 consumers annually, right? So there's a little bit of guardrail there. And then organizations that sell personal data, right, of 25,000 or more Colorado residents. So there's a little bit of guardrail, but still gonna have to manage to it.
Exactly right. Yeah, and that's the challenge, because I didn't look at CCPA, and I should have, but I'm pretty sure those aren't the exact same numbers in the California side. So this is where you get all these variations into the mix that now enterprises have to manage around.
Yeah, and we're gonna have to say, all right, what state is this coming from? All right, well, what are the all right? Break out the law. Let's go look.
Yep. Exactly right.
Yeah, I think it's not going to be too bad as long as they all somewhat resemble each other. Like we saw the same thing with breach reporting. Whereas as long as nobody's getting just crazy creative and just completely different rights and stuff like that, like when you skim over this, it looks pretty close to GDPR, right?
Yeah, in some respects. I mean, I, as a Colorado resident, because I am, the things I like in here is the ability to opt out, deny processing of my data, et cetera, right? As a consumer, I don't want Facebook using my information to serve up ads and selling my data and all that other stuff. So from a consumer perspective, I think this is great. I think it just creates challenges when we have what we'll end up with is 50 variations of this. That's all.
No, 100%. And it's an additional burden on business, because now we have to make sure that we're literally managing to 50 different states, because we don't want to be part of a litigation or a lawsuit, right? So now we have to make sure that we're on point with all of these differences, when it could be just give us one plan, one act, one playbook to go by, right? And we'll follow it. We want to follow it, right? And right. I see more organizations falling victim to not complying to this simply because they didn't follow a certain nuance, right? That wasn't part of a different state. And it creates way too much confusion.
Yeah, I don't know how you're even supposed to, and this is on top of, all the other things that they're already supposed to comply with,
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen to Sarbanes-Oxley and Gramm-Leach-Bliley and HIPAA and PCI and whatever other regulatory burden they have, plus now the privacy component on top of it. Yeah.
It's a lot. We need to bring it all together.
Yeah, for sure.
It's literally a whole category of security products.
Yeah, and can we build it as an integrated ecosystem so we don't have like 65?
It's an opportunity, Matt.
Best of breed.
It's an opportunity to build more products.
It is. Yeah, of course. Just what we need. Another product. Oh, thank you two for joining me today. Next week is Independence Day week, so that means we'll see you in 2 weeks on Business Security Weekly.